All right, today's lesson is going to be on American music in the modern era. This is going to be a two-part video. There's just too much here to cover to do it in one, and I'm trying not to do one mega video for you also. Two shorter videos I figure would be a little easier. There are 4 code words that are embedded in this lecture, and it's going to be across the 2 videos, so just make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that. I would have a piece of paper ready to write that down as we go along. So anyway, we haven't talked much about America in this class, and this was one of the chapters that I was going to cut, but because we had a virus hit, we are now able to add this unit in, which is going to actually vitally important. And it's going to be interesting for you to see the difference between music in the United States versus music in Europe during the modern era. They have a very different feel to it. So anyway, let's go to the next slide here. Let's talk about what music does start to look like in the early 1900s. We start with the continent of Africa. And the reason being is because we have a huge influence of African American culture on music in this era. So if we look at characteristics of music from Africa, one of the things that you notice when you study African music, and we're talking the traditional, sometimes tribal music, but native music to the continent of Africa, it's very rhythmic heavy. There's very little melody actually in African music. There's a lot of drumming, a lot of rhythm. There's a sense of call and response. If you think back to the Hildegard of Bingen recording that we listened to, that actually was an example of call and response. And I know you have to really think back. But this is where you have one main leader, and then you have people that repeat that. Very, very influential in Africa. Improvisation. There's a lot of room in African music, cultural music, for people to make up solos on the spot. It's very common practice. And then this is an interesting one. There's a sense of musical etiquette in African music. Music is taught in Africa and actually other parts of the world too in speech patterns. And so you would learn to say a paragraph or a chant or something like that, and that actually, the rhythm and how you'd say the words, that would be how the rhythm of the music would go. And just like it's rude to talk over other people when they're talking, it's the same thing in African music. If someone is quote unquote talking with their music, it's rude to talk over other people. And you do find that influence in early American music. Now, how did they get here? It's real simple. With the African slaves that came over in the 16 and 1700s, they brought a lot of this cultural influence, and then that mixes with the Anglo-European culture, and we had this African American musical culture. The first big influence that comes out of really the late 1800s is blues. And the blues comes from the Mississippi Delta region. If you're familiar with what a delta is, that's where a river and an ocean meet. And so this is the very southern part of Mississippi, kind of swampy area. And in that area, we have the blues. And I want to play an example of a blues song for you. This is a legendary blues performer, a guy named Cab Calloway. He's a little quirky, so you just kind of have to get over the quirks a little bit. But he's an absolute legend. Here's Cab.
Here's a story about Minnie the Moocher. so red, hot, huge, she was the roughest, toughest, frail. Many had a heart as big as a whale. Heidi, 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 Heidi. Heidi, 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 Heidi. Oh, she had a dream about the King of Sweden. He gave her things that she was needing. He gave her a home built to gold and steel, a diamond car with people at the wheels. Howdy, 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 howdy. 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 Oobly, bam, 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 doobly, bam, doobly, bam, 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 doobly, bam. Ooba, labba, dooba, labba, doo. He gave her his townhouse and his racing horses. Each meal she ate was a dozen courses. She had $1 million worth of nickels and dimes. She sat around and counted them all 1,000,000 times. Heidi, 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 Heidi. Heidi, 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 Heidi. Oh, heedy, heedy, heedy. Heedy, heedy, heedy. Heidi, 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 ho. Heidi, 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 ho. Poor man, poor man, poor man.
So in that, you actually see all of the different characteristics from African cultural music. You have the improvisation, the trumpet player is making up those solos the entire time. You have call and response. Cab says, "Hi, yada, yada, yo," and then the people repeat that. You have a heavy rhythmic influence. The three players in the back, the bass, the drum, and the piano, we actually call that the rhythm section of a blues group. And then the last one is the sense of musical etiquette. The trumpet player was actually filling in between the different lines of the verse that Cab would sing. He'd sing a verse, and then while he's taking a breath, the trumpet player has a little lick, as they call it. And the goal is not to step on the soloist. So anyway, that's the blues. Comes out of Mississippi. Another area that's very popular in the early 1900s is New Orleans, and we have that with jazz. Jazz is similar to the blues, but has a kind of a different feel to it. So I want to play an example of traditional New Orleans style jazz, and I'm going to do that with a video that's done by Louis Armstrong, famous trumpet player and jazz musician, and he's playing a New Orleans classic, When the Saints Go Marching In. By the way, your first code word is jazz.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's one you all can sing with us. When the Saints Go Marching In. Everybody sing. Now when the saints go marching in. Now when the saints go marching in. Yes, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in. Sing it again. Now when the saints marching in. Now when the saints go marching in. Yes, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in. Ah, y'all sing pretty out there. Joe Daring, boy. Come young. Ah, what a beautiful audience out there swinging with us. On behalf of Jewel Brown, Billy Kyle, Joe Daringsburg, Summer Young, Billy Crunk, Danny Barcelona, little Filipino boy on the drums, little Arabian boy saxophone. We are very happy to have swung this number for you folks. It's cutting out time now. Before we cut out from here, let's take them saints on down one more time. Now I win the saints. Marching, whoa, boy. When the saints marching in. Yes, I found in that number. Hit it when the saints go marching in.
It's happy music. So anyway, legendary Louis Armstrong, When the Saints Go Marching In. And hopefully you're seeing the influences of the African American music, or African music, in this African American inspired art form. And notice, it's not just people who are black that are performing. Jazz actually is one of the first art forms that mixes the races in the United States. Okay, so we've got these two. The last major cultural influence that comes from the African American community is the Harlem Renaissance. There is an excellent presentation by one of the groups on the Harlem Renaissance. I would encourage you to watch that if you want to learn about that. But this is a major cultural hotspot in New York City. So we have Mississippi, we have New Orleans, and then boom, we go all the way north to New York City. And New York City will kind of dominate music for decades in the early part of the 1900s. Okay, next part. We have Tin Pan Alley. This is something that kind of happens alongside of the Harlem Renaissance. So what is Tin Pan Alley? This is a collection of New York City music publishers and songwriters, and it was the late 1900s, early 20th century, and right in New York City. Um, it says here, it started around 1885 or so. Um, and we just happen to have a bunch of publishers that set up in the same basic area. And then this era, this Tin Pan Alley era with these songwriters and publishers will go all the way to about the Great Depression. Some people say into the 1950s when rock and roll kind of dominated it. The name Tin Pan Alley actually comes from, it's a derogatory term. People were making fun of these publishers because they thought that the songs that they were producing sounded like people banging tin pans against each other. However, we have major songwriters and composers that come out of Tin Pan Alley. The first one is a guy named Irving Berlin. This may be the first major popular songwriter in American history. Some songs you may recognize: Putting on the Ritz, White Christmas, Happy Holiday, No Business Like Show Business. He wrote God Bless America, which just about everyone knows. I want to play a little video. This is actually Irving Berlin singing a song that he wrote to help recruit for the Army. This is during World War II. This is Irving Berlin actually singing.
Come on, it's time to get up. Come on, Sleeping Beauty, wake up. You gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up this morning.
Been a soldier quite a while, and I would like to state the life is simply wonderful. The army food is great. I sleep with 97 others in a wooden hut. I love them all. They all love me. It's very lovely, but oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I'd love to remain in bed. For the hardest blow of all is to hear the bugler call. You gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up this morning. Someday I'm going to murder the bugler. Someday they're going to find him dead. I'll amputate his reveille and step upon it heavily and spend the rest of my life in bed.
Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I love to remain in bed. For the hardest blow of all is to hear the bugler call. You gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up this morning. Someday I'm going to murder the bugler. Someday you're going to find him dead.
And then I'll get that other pup, the guy who wakes the bugler up,
and spend the rest of my life in bed.
So anyway, that's kind of a fun song that Irving Berlin wrote and performed. Second code word is the word army. Let's talk about some other Tin Pan Alley composers of note. There was a brother duo, and actually I think the rest of the composers we're going to talk about are in duos. The first one, George Gershwin and his brother Ira Gershwin. These two guys were a big deal as brothers. Ira went on to write a lot of popular music into the 50s and 60s. He lived a nice long life. George actually died early. I think tuberculosis? I don't remember what he died of. But he was actually the more important composer of the two. So I'm going to take away Ira and talk about a couple of pieces that George Gershwin wrote. The first one is one of the ones that really he got a lot of fame from. This is featured in Fantasia 2000. If you watch the one that has the construction worker and the little girl who loses her ball and the guy who's down on his luck, that's the song Rhapsody in Blue. This is one of his first major pieces. An American in Paris, is another one who really made him famous. And then we've got a folk opera called Porgy and Bess, and this is a really interesting work. I'm going to show one of the most famous songs from it called "Summertime." This is the first opera that the parts were specifically written for people who are black. One of the things that made Gershwin famous is he was able to take jazz and that type of cultural music and put it, kind of dress it up, put it on stage, and make it look real fancy. So here is the folk opera Porgy and Bess, the song Summertime. So anyway, even though it's refined opera singing, in the background we have actually blues chords, and that you can go through and listen again if you want to listen to the orchestra part. This all will morph into, during the Depression, Tin Pan Alley will kind of die away, and we're going to have what's called the big band era. And this is actually, I think I would say that this is the first bit of actual pop music in the United States. This is the type of music that starts to bring out the first, what we would call the teen heartthrobs. And the first guy who really falls in that category is Frank Sinatra. I'm going to play a song from the big band era. Notice it's a lot like jazz. It's just bigger. This is going to be Duke Ellington.
should take
A train.
Hurry,
You get to where you're going in a hurry. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Now it's coming. Can't you hear the rails are humming? Leota, if you should miss the A train, you miss the quickest way to get to Harlem.
Once again, that was a group that was, it's a big band that's led by a guy named Duke Ellington. He was the guy on the piano. Your third code word is going to be the word Duke. And this will wrap up the first part of the American music lesson